Why do people avoid accountability in the first place? There's a number of reasons for this. A large part of it can just be general emotional immaturity and arrested development. That is where you will often see it play out quite a lot, especially in those with avoidant attachment styles. And then going a little bit deeper as to the specific elements that will comprise this, and I'm not saying that it's only avoidants that have the ability to not be accountable. Everyone and anyone does. It's oftentimes in relational dynamics, at least in my experience and through the studies that I'm undertaking, that it seems to play out a little bit more frequently in those. But there are always exceptions to the rule. So some of the deeper elements that are at play when someone has an inability to be accountable are more deep-seated fears, essentially that fear of or being scared of being wrong, and it makes them, they're worried about being seen as bad or unworthy. And then tied into this is some of those deeper shame wounds. So admitting that they have done something wrong, they see that almost as an entire attack on who they are as a person. And that's where the difference between guilt and shame come into play. Guilt is, I did something wrong. Shame is, I am something wrong. Big difference between the two. And those with those really deep-seated shame wounds, which historically I have been, if you have those deep-seated shame wounds, you will do everything and anything to avoid having to dive into that and open that wound. So this is where that lack of accountability comes into play. You don't want to open any of that Pandora's box, so you avoid it. Not healthy for the person on the receiving end of it, not by any stretch. And another thing that plays out, which is so common, is just emotional dysregulation. So for some people who, again, have that real inability to deal with conflict, to sit with emotions, to be able to hear someone, they can go into a completely dysregulated state and essentially shut down. And so when they are in this dysregulated state, they are reacting instead of responding. So oftentimes they will react defensively even before they have processed what has been said. So you might even just lead in with, I'm really upset that you did, and then it just turns into white noise for them. They may not hear anything else that you say after that because they just go into that internal shame loop of, I am something wrong, I've done something wrong, I can't handle this, I'm a shit person, I'm blah, blah. All of their shame narratives start playing out, and they can spiral internally, even with something that's seemingly innocuous. Like, I'm just a bit upset, babe, that blah, blah, blah happened. Poof, off they go. And another thing that also comes into play, and it is all interrelated, is it can often be a learnt behaviour, especially if we are dealing with people that have a history of childhood trauma or exposures to chronic relational distress. So with the learnt behaviour, it doesn't always have to be from childhood, but it oftentimes is. So with the learnt behaviour, oftentimes it might have been growing up in environments that were overly punitive. So even small things that they did wrong were met with quite severe consequences. So off the back of that, they would just try and hide, and I did not do anything wrong, so I could avoid getting into trouble. So that's one element that it can be learned. But in another way, it can be, especially if there's some of the narcissistic traits that might be floating around in some of the parents, it's owning up to mistakes can be seen as weak. And then when you tie that all in together, so you've got these learnt behaviours, you've got these deep internal shame wounds, you've got this inability to emotionally regulate, it just plays into some people being so exceptionally emotionally immature and unable to handle conflict. And if someone isn't able to be accountable, they're not able to empathise with you. And empathy is huge. It is so essential for healthy relationships.